Hi there, Rueben here from Native Instruments. In this short how-to video, I'm going to be looking at some different techniques you can use to make your bass and drum parts sound as realistic as possible. Most pop, rock and metal tracks are built on the foundation of bass and drums, so it's really important to get this right. Having your percussion and low end working well together ensures that your track has a great groove. To demo these techniques, I'll be using drum libraries from GetGood Drums and bass guitars from Orange Tree Samples and Impact Soundworks. All of these libraries run in complete control and the free Kontakt player. However, many of these techniques translate to other libraries and your own samples. Let's start with the Invasion from GetGood Drums. This is a library primarily geared up for rock and metal, featuring huge kits with a possible 7 snares, 4 kicks, 12 toms and 30 cymbals, all from a wide range of manufacturers. Although there are lots of options for tweaking, it's easy to jump straight in with the presets. Each preset kit has 2 versions, a raw and a turbo version, which dials in a bespoke mix. This is kind of like parallel processing, but the work is already done for you. Parallel processing, especially parallel compression and distortion, are techniques often used to create really crisp and energetic drum parts, so try it yourself by mixing your raw drum signal with another that's been run through some processing. Whatever drum library you're using, it's worth knowing the range of dynamics that have been recorded and matching those to your MIDI. In the case of the Invasion, the highest velocities feature hits where the drummer has really thrashed the kit. So I'm taking account of this when programming the MIDI and dialing the velocities down a little in this particular case. Layering real drum samples with synthetic drum samples is another classic technique and something that's worth trying if you want your own drums to have extra punch and definition. Using drum machine samples for kick and snare will sound pretty lifeless on their own, but mixed with the natural variation of real drums, it's a killer combination. In the case of the Invasion, there are already a variety of kick and snare trigger samples, which you can easily dial in with the onboard mixer. Also on the mixer page are options for the different mic positions, including drum recording standards like overhead and room mics. These are all phase aligned, another important thing to remember for multi-mic'd kits. I'm adjusting the mic level faders here by using the dials on my Complete Control keyboard, one big advantage of the NKS system. One trick I like to use is to make sure that the sound from ambient mics is spread across the stereo field pretty widely, so it doesn't interfere with any centre panned vocals or bass. Another tip, tuning kick, snare and toms can make all the difference to the cohesive sound of your track. If you can, try to adjust the pitch of the drums to the root key of your song. With this library, it's as easy as adjusting the pitch dial for each drum and mic position. Shreddage 3 Abyss from Impact Soundworks is a really good option for aggressive bass guitar tones. Sampling a 6-string Muckleroy electric bass, it goes as low as a drop G and extends up to 4.5 octaves. Recorded with a direct input, the options for adding effects are many and varied, with an onboard effects rack. There are a host of different playing modes, which includes loads of different articulations and functions for strumming, capo position, and options to force strings. Depending on what guitar library you're using for your own tracks, you may have the option to adjust pickup controls or capo position. This can dramatically change the tone. so it's worth experimenting. Multi-tracking a bass line can sound great. Abyss has this function on board with up to quadruple tracking. But you can emulate it yourself in other libraries with plugins like Guitar Rig 5. Alternatively, try copying tracks and transposing Contact up a few semitones and your MIDI notes down by the same, so different samples are being played. Pan these tracks across the stereo field for a nice wide sound. Abyss has lots of presets which load parameters and populate the effects rack. The preset Abyss Modern Metal fits perfectly with the thrashing drums. I'm actually using the strumming engine here to help with the fast riff, as I can play quickly on just a couple of strumming keys whilst changing notes with the left hand. Making sure that the MIDI notes are connected helps add to the authenticity, making the individual samples sound more joined up. This kind of riff is all about being tight and precise, so there's no harm in quantizing the MIDI notes. In fact, there are a number of features in the shreddage engine, which means that even with strictly quantized notes, the sound is natural, with built-in random resonance and the shred dials here joining up individual notes with some clever shred scripting. When it comes to combining the drums with the bass line, it's a good idea to consider tightening up the timing in your DAW or using onboard controls. In this example, an offset of -30 milliseconds lines up the downstrokes exactly with the beat. This helps the combination of bass and drums sound nice and tight. Let's take a quick look at more standard pop and rock bass and drums using GetGood Drums Modern and Massive and Orange Tree Samples Evolution Flat Wound Bass. This drum library has a clean, powerful and vibrant tone. Again, with lots of different drum combinations, including classics like Pearl and Ludwig. It's great for modern pop and rock, and the options are actually quite similar to the Invasion, including the mic mixing options and the fantastic turbo parallel processing. To get up and running quickly, there are lots of preloaded patterns in the Groove Player, which you can just export into your DAW. Filtering by drum if you want to. I've done this with a couple of them and then edited the MIDI to what I need. Many DAWs and drum libraries have onboard grooves, and there are lots of free MIDI patterns available online. Although there's supposed to be a general MIDI standard, most drum libraries aren't mapped to the same keys, so you'll probably need to experiment with moving the MIDI to the correct key for snare, hi-hats and kick, etc. One important element I've added to the riff are ghost notes on the kick and snare. These are very low velocity hits which, although they're quiet, really add to the groove. I've also further humanised the MIDI using onboard tools in the DAW, which makes subtle changes to positions of notes and the velocities. All of this helps the drums sound more lifelike. This library has onboard options for snare bleed, where the signal from the snare microphones is picked up by other drum mics. Personally, I love this effect, especially allowing a little snare to bleed onto the kick and toms for some added sparkle. You can emulate this in your DAW with some clever routing, with the snare signal being sidechained to the kick trigger. There are other ways to pull off this effect, but it's handy that this drum library has it built in. I've paired these drums with a bass from Orange Tree Samples, a laid-back preset from Evolution Flat Wound Bass. Just like the shreddage bass, this instrument has lots of options for fretting position, multi-tracking, onboard effects and lots of different articulations. One of the secrets to a good bass line is including all the little noises and slides that you can hear when a real-life bassist plays up and down the fretboard. These noises are especially easy to program with this library, as all the little effects are mapped to the yellow keys just here. I actually use them in combination with played notes to add extra authenticity, a nice technique. Having all the articulations available here is a real bonus, as you can set them up to trigger via velocity, key switch, via the sustain pedal, or just randomly. For example, I've set up the palm mutes at the lowest velocities and slapped sustains at the highest, with the normal fingered sustains playing at mid velocity. Slides, slaps, hammer-ons, pull-offs, grace notes and mutes are all common bass playing techniques, so remember to factor in these articulation changes when you're programming your own bass parts to add groove and character. I'll mention just one other thing about the Orange Tree sample libraries in particular, as they're all based on the same engine. You can load up different instruments and use the same MIDI to experiment with tone. Here's the roundwood bass as an example. A really different timbre. Hopefully that's given you a good idea of how you can use a few different techniques with the products I've highlighted and translate some of these tips to your own sample libraries. Thanks so much for watching.